Okay, I have started the record. Sorry, I forgot to record. Okay. So what are the proposal structure or components that any proposal needs to be consist of? Okay. I have here today 4 main components that you need to include in your research proposal, which are first the research title, chapter 1, introduction, background, problem statement, research questions, objectives, theoretical framework, significance of the study, and then definitions. Then we have chapter 2, which is literature review, systematic review, meta-analysis, and then chapter 3, research methodology, study design, and then phases of the study, and finally, proposed data analysis. And we are going to talk about each one of these components in details. Now, let's start with the research title. Research title is a very unique thing that is actually considered to be like an ID for you as a researcher, okay? So what are the main components that you need to include in the research title? Any ideas, guys? Anyone would like to share? What is or what are the main components that you need to include in the research title? Any ideas? And why it's so unique? Why it's actually related to the researcher? Variables, good. Theory, topic, okay, what else? Approach. Okay, DV and IV, all right. Okay, that's good, guys, that's good. As I mentioned, the research title is very unique and it's something only for you as a researcher. Okay, so what you need to include, I came out with this 3 main components that you need to include in the research title, which are first your area of interest. Anyone that is going to read your research title could be able to identify your focus. Okay, so make sure to clarify your focus, your area of interest in the research title. Okay, for example, if you are studying about social media in education, the role of social media in education, you need to highlight that in the research title. Then second component is the outcomes of the research. Okay, you need to highlight what the contribution of this research is going to be. For example, if you are going to develop a framework, okay, or you're going to design a module, okay, this needs to be highlighted in the research titles. And then obviously, can you guys mute the mic, please? Okay, and then the third component is the variables, as you said, the main components. For example, if you are studying about student satisfaction, academic achievement, whatever variables that you are going to measure needs to be highlighted in the research title. And my advice to you, when you come out with your research title, after a lot of, search and making sure that it's not a duplicate from other people's work, because as I mentioned, the research title is like an ID for you as a researcher. What to do next is to make sure your supervisor has agreed with this research title. It's, only then you can actually start with writing chapter 1, chapter 2, and chapter 3 of the research proposal. Okay. So any question regarding the research title? Is everything clear? All clear. Okay. Then, when you are done with the research title, obviously you are going to go with chapter one. And what to include in chapter one, there are so many subsections that you need to include. And chapter one, believe me, it's the most important chapter in the research proposal. So make sure you do your best in writing the research proposal. Most of the time, when chapter one is very good quality, okay, and chapter two and three not that quality in the proposal defense, you are going to pass because chapter one is the basics, okay, but chapter two, chapter three can be updated later on. Chapter one is very, very important. It's the basic, the main outlines of the research. What to include in chapter one? Obviously, most of the time it depends on your supervisor. But here are some of the most, let's say, common components that you need to include in chapter one. Introduction, background of the problem, problem statement, research questions, objectives, theoretical framework, significance of the study, and finally, the definitions of terms. And let's talk about each one in details and know the differences because there are some students who are confused, for example, between the background and the problem statement and the introduction. Okay, let's clarify all these questions. As an introduction, what you need to do is first you need to state the general topic and give some background. What's going on about this topic nowadays? Okay, what's trending? And then you need to provide some review of the literature that is related to the topic, but make sure it's very summarized and concise because the introduction needs to be short. It's not a literature review. You are going to have the background, and then you are going to have chapter two to talk about the literature in details. So remember, the introduction, it's not where you extend about talking about the literature review. Okay, you need to define the very, the main, let's say, main terms and the scope of the topic, what you are going to be solving, and then you need to outline the current situation that is very, very related to your uh, area of interest. And then finally, you need to evaluate the current situation. By evaluation, I mean you need to look for gaps, okay? And this is the main purpose of the research. You need to contribute, okay? So if there's no gaps, there's no research, okay? So you need to mention at the end of the introduction about the main contribution, main, let's say, objective of this research, okay? And then when you are finished with the introduction comes the background. If I ask you guys, what is the difference between introduction and background? What is the difference? Anyone? If you don't want to type in the chat, you just unmute and try to talk. What is the difference between the introduction and the background? Okay, background includes context. All right. Introduction is a brief idea. Okay. Introduction summarize the whole research while background is focusing on the background of the gap. Okay. All right. These are good answers. All right, let's get to be familiar with the background, the meaning of the background. The background of the study provide the context and to some extent history of the research on that particular topic, which means I'm going to use a lot of literature in the background. It's like, a mini chapter two, but you need to be concise on the gap, the research questions. So the background, the problem, actually talking about each variable of the study that you are going to conduct. For example, if you have 4 variables, then the background needs to be subsections 4 variable. Each variable of your study needs to be one of them. Okay. Contain the critical data related to research questions. As I mentioned, each research question needs to have a section in the background, and then you are going to talk about it, globally, and then in your area of study. The background refers to an in-depth study, literature review. You are going to be more systematic when writing the background of the study, okay? And then the background should consist of work carried out in a relevant area. It's all about what other people have studied that is very related to my study, and then I'm going to compare. I'm going to show, argue uh, my claims. If this study comes out with a gap or problem that needs to be solved, then all needs to be stated in the background of the study. So the differences between the introduction and background, very obvious. The introduction is very brief, while the background dealing with each variable of uh, your study, okay? And needs to be very in-depth, systematic analysis when it comes to literature review, what's going on, what's the gap, how this research is going to contribute to the body of knowledge. Now, problem statement. So introduction, background the problem, and then the research, the problem statement or the problem of the study. Now, when you want to write the problem of your study, you need to ask yourself some questions. If you are able to answer these questions, then only then actually you can write your problem. Okay. What is the problem? Why there is a problem? Okay. Is there anybody else have already solved this problem? Okay. Is there any theory that is actually related to this problem and what to solve in this problem? Okay. Have anybody else solved this problem, and how are you going to follow the same approach? Okay. So all these questions needs to be highlighted in your research problem. Now, a research problem most of the time consists of, let's say, 3 paragraphs. Okay. Paragraph number 1, you are going to introduce about the problem and then how to solve it. Or sorry, the second one, how other people or how other literature is going to help you identify the gaps. And then finally, how are you going to actually solve the problem? That if there's a problem, then how are you going to tackle this problem? All right. So far, no question, guys. Any questions? Any question, guys?
Dr. Assalamualaikum. My name is
Walaikum
Atika.
salam.
As you said just now, for the problem statement, there are 3 main paragraphs. So it's actually suggested for us to do 3 paragraph for the problem of statement, or we need to actually include all of these 3 elements, and it doesn't matter like how many paragraphs that we should have for the problem statement. That's all. Thank you.
Okay. So basically, it's all about the research, your supervisor. If your supervisor advised you to write in 3 paragraphs or 2 pages, 3 pages, but the most common way and uh, the most, let's say, correct way is to divide the research problem to be very clear to the reader. So when I said in 3 paragraphs, when you first you introduce the problem globally, and then how other literature, how other researchers have tackled this problem, and then you come out with the way, the approach, the strategy that you are going to solve. If you write the research problem in this method, it's going to be very easy for the reader to actually understand, and make sure it's all about answering these questions. Is there actually a problem? You need to convince the reader that there is a problem needs to be solved in this area of research. Okay, clear? Okay, and when it comes to research problem, it's all about justification. You know, research is actually all about justification. Okay, you need to justify your work whenever you do your writing. All right, and then we have the research questions and objectives. Obviously, when it comes to research questions and objectives, it's all about how, in the first place, you have picked the title. So, from the title, you are going to uh, come out with the research questions and the research objectives, and it's all about your research, your knowledge, your reading. So when you read a lot and you know that this topic has not been conducted before, it's not been, tackled before by researchers, only then you can come out with appropriate research questions. And what you need to do is you need to consider your audience, the target of the research. Okay. And then is when everything is clear at this point, the title, the research problem, okay, you can state the research questions and then evaluate them. And then uh, my continuous advice is always go back to your supervisor when you write, when you finish writing a problem statement, research questions, objectives. Let your supervisor see your work and evaluate the questions. And then we have the theoretical framework. Now, I believe all of us from the human science, social science, okay, when it comes to social science, we need to build our research and based on a theory, okay. So this is very tricky part in the research, and it might be hard sometimes because there are hundreds of theories out there. How to come out with the most appropriate theory in your research, and to do that you need to identify the key terms from the problem statement. That's why your problem statements is going to come out with everything in the research. The problem statements is going to provide you with the research questions, and is going to provide you with the theory that you are going to have. And then not only the problem statement and the background are going to give you the basic outlines to come out with the theory that you are going to use. Okay. And always make sure to read other theories. Do not, pick one theory and stick with it. Maybe there is another theory that is more appropriate for your research. So it's all about justification. Okay, when you, for example, choose 2 theories out of 10 in your area, you need to justify. You need to state why these 2 theories are the most appropriate theories to use in your research. Maybe other people have done it before. So you always need to argue and justify. All right. And then, of course, for the significance of the study, you need to highlight your research. What is the contribution of your study? How it's beneficial to the development of science and society? The contribution, you need to state about the contribution uh, of this study among the society or the community. Then finally, in chapter 1, we have the definitions. To always keep the definition brief and basic, because you are going to elaborate more in chapter 2. 8 words always. Okay, do not repeat, and the define definition. Okay, so these are the main components when it comes to writing chapter 1. And always remember, as I mentioned, chapter 1 is very, very important. If it's clear, there's no problem in the research. Okay, all clear chapter 1, guys? Any question in chapter 1? Okay. Okay, when it comes to research proposal, you need to talk about literature, okay? But it's not the time to extend the talk, okay? Do not talk too much about the literature, because in the proposal defense, there will be no more than maybe 2 or 3 questions about the literature, okay? So make sure put all your efforts in chapter 1. And obviously, the literature in your research proposal is going to be an extension for the background, if you still remember. So this background, if the background is clear, you have used an updated references, it's going to be very easy to come out with the literature review. Okay. Why do we need, so many students are asking, why do we need a literature review? Why is important in the research? Actually, literature review is the most important part in your research, because you are going to need it to come out with the problem. You are going to need it to justify your work. You are going to need it to come out with the way that you are going to actually conduct the research. You are going to need it to write your discussion later on in chapter 5 when you are past the proposal defense. So literature review is very, very important. Okay, it's not about quoting other people's work. No, you need this work. You need to look for gaps. Okay, you need to look what's going on in the current research. All these kind of information you are going to get only by writing the literature review. Okay, so it's the place where you extend the explanation about each variable in your study. Okay, you need to describe the relationship of each work to the others under consideration, identify new ways to interpret prior research, reveal any gaps that exist in the literature. So it's all about looking for gaps, looking for solutions, looking for answers, looking for justification. Okay, and my advice to you in chapter 2, use a lot of tables and figures, use systematic review. What I mean by systematic review is, when you finish writing, let's say 3 pages about, let's say, student satisfaction, okay, you wrote 3 pages, you have quoted a lot of references, then what is better now is to come out with a table after these 3 pages, summarize all the literature that you have used, okay, systematically. So anybody could look at the table, would know that you as a researcher understand what's going on about this student satisfaction matter, Is it trending nowadays because we are using online? What are the very most up-to-date references that have tackled this problem? Okay, so always remember in chapter 2, make it easy for your supervisor and for you as a researcher and for the examiners later on. So always summarize your work, put it in tables, figures, to make it easy to follow in the literature view. One more time, literature view is very important because it is going to help you out in writing the whole chapters, whole thesis, okay? Problem statement, background, coming out with the questions, looking for the instrument, how to conduct, okay? How to come out with a questionnaire. All this kind of information you are going to get only by reading and then looking among the literature, looking for gaps, problems, and so on. And then we have chapter 3. Chapter 3 is actually the how part. How I'm going to conduct my research. Okay. In chapter 1, it's the what part. What I mean by what is what I'm gonna do. Okay. What I'm gonna do. Now in the research number 3, sorry, in chapter 3 is the how I'm going to do it, how I'm going to conduct the research, how I'm going to collect the data, how I'm going to analyze the data, how I'm going to, um, do the whole experiments and so on. So let's talk about chapter 3 and what to include. In the research methodology, you need to type, make it clear, you need to highlight what type of research that you are going to conduct. Is it quantitative? Is it qualitative? Is it mixed method? Why? Always remember, research is all about justification. So when whatever you do, you need to justify. And it's even better if you justify and then you quote other people's work to strengthen your point, or you need to do like vice versa of other people work, you also need to justify. So it's always about justification. Is it quantitative? Why? Okay. Is it qualitative? You need to justify because I need more in-depth analysis, I need more in-depth opinions from the students. So always remember to justify. How are you going to collect the data? Okay. Is it online? Is it face to face? Is it by interviewing people? Okay. And then how you are going to analyze the data. Any tools? Are you going to design the tool by yourself? For example, are you going to come out with your own questionnaire? What to do? If you are going to come out with your own questionnaire, then there are steps that you need to follow, validation, experts, and so on. But if you want to adapt, maybe you can only uh, email the one who is responsible for this survey, and then you can simply use it. So all this kind of the information needs to be stated, okay, in the research methodology. And always remember to justify. Now, for the study design, you need to consider your aim and approach. What approach are you going to apply, okay, in the research? You need to identify the population and sampling in your research. Anyone knows the difference between population and sampling? What is the difference between population of the study and sample of the study? Anyone? What is the difference between the sample of the study and the population? Okay, sample is the number of the participants taking part in the research, correct? represent some characteristics of population. Okay, it's like a representative. Okay, so the sample, the ones that I'm going to conduct the research on, for example, the population, if I'm running a research in UTM undergraduate students, okay, this is my population, all undergraduate students. But my sample is maybe 200, 300 that are going to be, you know, participants in the research. So the population is the big umbrella, okay? Okay, choose your data collection methods. Always make sure that everything is clear. And when it comes to research methodology, you need to clarify all the data collection methods, whether face-to-face, online, and so on. Okay, the last part of chapter 3, or maybe no, not the last one. The third one is the phases of the study. And my advice to you, this is very important advice when it comes to writing research methodology. Always divide your research into phases. So each phase could be a research by itself. What do I mean by that is, for example, if you have 4 questions, okay, uh, 4 questions, each question has a different objective, okay? So if you make the research methodology divided into 4 phases, so that each phase talk about or solve one research problem, it's going to be very easy for your supervisor, the examiners to understand your research, okay? So what you do in chapter 3, make a figure, all right? Divide your research into maybe 3, 4 sections. Section number 1 is going to answer, or phase number 1 is going to answer question number 1. Whatever, tools, materials that you have used in answering chapter 1, you need to state it in the phase 1. By doing that, your research is going to be very organized and easy to follow and by your examiners. Okay, not only that, when you write the discussion part, it's going to be very easy to recall the data. All right, so always remember to organize your research, clarify each phase, link each of your phases with the research questions. As I mentioned, phase number 1 maybe is going to answer question number 1 and 2. Phase number 2 is going to answer the third question. Okay. Phase number 3 is going to answer question number 4 and 5 and whatever. So always organize, always use figures and tables, charts, whatever in the research methodology to make it very easy for examiners to follow your points. Then finally, in the research proposal, you don't need to go so far in the data analysis. You just need to provide some information about the proposed way to actually analyze the data, what software you are going to use, how are you going to conduct your pilot study, okay, what data, what software, okay, and then always remember to include tables and figures so that it could be very easy to follow by you, supervisor, and then the examiners. And always remember, after each chapter, try to write a conclusion, a very precise conclusion about whatever you have wrote in your chapter. All right, guys. So I have shared with you the main 4 components of your research proposal, starting with the research title, chapter 1, chapter 2, and 3. We have clarified some, let's say terms, components, for example, the difference between introduction, background, and the problem statement. I hope everything was clear and it was easy to follow. If you guys have any questions, please, it's time for the questions. You guys have any questions? Go ahead. Any question, guys? All clear? Okay, we have a question from Dr. Najwa. I have a question regarding theoretical framework. Do we need to explain the theory in details by including the Okay, now when you talk about the theoretical framework in chapter 1, you don't need to go in details. You need to clarify why this theory is the proper theory to use in your study. But when it comes to chapter 2 in the literature, of course, you need to go in depth. You need to extend your explanation about the theory. So do not mix between these two. The theoretical framework part in chapter 1 needs to be very, well written, concise about the theory and its relation to the variables of the study. Okay, but later on, of course, you are going to talk about the theory in chapter 2. So in chapter 2, you can go in details, uh, do whatever that is going to actually satisfy you in regarding to the theory. Does that answer your question, Najwa? All right, welcome. Anybody else? No, any more questions? Okay, the recording I can share with you maybe tomorrow, okay, when it's ready. Do you need to put conceptual framework after theoretical framework in chapter 1? Well, this most of the time depends on the supervisor. In my case, yes, I have put a conceptual framework after the theoretical framework. And the only difference between conceptual and theoretical, the theoretical is all about the theory, okay, and the justification, how did you use this theory, while the conceptual framework, how to how to actually apply this theory in your research, how it's going to be applied, how it's going to be utilized, how it's going to be evaluated. Okay, so it's like, a practical part of the theory. How do you use it in the research, the conceptual part? But it depends on your supervisor. You need to ask about, some supervisor ask for conceptual, some did not. Okay, any other question, guys? Yeah, most welcome, Mohammed. Any other questions? Okay, guys, it was a pleasure talking to you. And do not forget our two more sessions next week with Associate Professor Dr. Jamal Uddin and Associate Professor Dr. Noor Afandi. I wish you all the best and thank you very much. Thank you very much. Okay, I have one more question here. In writing, should we arrange references in seating order? No. Do you mean by date? No, no, no. You can go from old to new, new to old. It doesn't matter. There's no attendance actually. There's no attendance. Okay. I will share with you the slides and I will share with you the video when they are ready. Thank you very much, guys. I wish you all the best. If you do have any question, you feel free to ask anytime in the groups or in private. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Most welcome. Assalamu alaikum.